Hello again, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. 14th day of August, 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, we've got on the hazardous weather graphic, no hazards. So no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere around the state for the next day or so. And on the satellite imagery, you can see moisture rolling through the southeast coast during the day today, but not a whole lot of precipitation. Heaviest amounts are up in the north, but only at, 1 to 2 tenths of an inch, I believe just under 1/3 of an inch falling at Yakutat, Dry Bay, and then lighter amounts scattered around the interior of the Panhandle there. Otherwise, actually heavier precipitation fell over the Copper River Basin, Paxton picking up 1/2 an inch of rainfall in the last 12 hours, Gull County about 1/3 of an inch. And rain ending, showers, and beginning to clear out Cook Inlet. Clear skies, Kodiak Island, with gusty west winds that gust as high as 40 miles an hour at AKwx and 25 to 30 miles an hour at the West Kodiak State Airport. Temperatures in the mid-60s there. Also with the clearing, temperatures starting to rise into the mid-60s to sit in the valley. Otherwise, 70s were not seen at all today around the state. Pretty chilly up to the northwest interior, seeing temperatures in the lower to lower 40s this afternoon, with the clouds and cool conditions there coming down from the northwest out of the Arctic, with clouds and scattered showers extending all the way down in toward Kuskokwim Bay, Nunivak Island area. And not too bad over the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, again from Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay, higher pressure along there, and fair amount of sunshine there for the Alaska Peninsula, and scattered sunshine there for the central and western Aleutians. On the chart, you can see one trough swinging in, upper level trough as well, with quite an extensive area of light precipitation, with Nome, Kotzebue picking up about 1 to 2 tenths of an inch of precipitation today. Kiana, same thing, and lighter amounts in toward the Kobuk and Koyukuk valleys, just a few hundredths of an inch there. And precipitation more or less cutting off in the Kuskokwim Mountains. Pretty light, though, over the Kuskokwim Delta into the Togiak Bay area. Just a few hundredths again. Heavier, though, over the Copper River Basin with that trough there. Low pressure North Gulf Coast moving eastward, so skies clearing out. As you can see, southern Cook Inlet, even northern Cook Inlet to sit in the valley. Again, that allowing temperatures to push into the upper 60s there in the Sitna Valley this afternoon, mid to upper 60s at mid-afternoon, and the showers over the northern Panhandle pretty much ended down south there with as the approach of the next system there off the coast, and weak high pressure building in between. But you can also see the good clearing there with high pressure southern Bering Sea, Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. For tonight, not much change there. Areas of low clouds and fog over the southern Bering Sea. Chance of rain with that next system that's not all that strong. Coming up to the Adak area, and periods of rain, that slow-moving front into the central interior areas, back to the northwest and west. Just isolated showers down toward northern Bristol Bay. Dry eastern interior. And for tomorrow, look for drier conditions for the Panhandle. Showers mostly over toward the eastern border. Dry over southern Alaska, Kodiak Island. Southern Bering Sea, just a chance of some moisture with that front over the central Aleutians spreading in toward Nikolsky. And up to the north, or for the Monday outlook, we've got another system dropping down from the northwest there. So clouds, chilly temperatures, and periods of rain and showers there from the eastern Arctic coast, much of the northeast interior, central Brooks Range, Kobuk Koyukuk Valley, right on down into the Tanana Valley, and extending southwest along the Yukon River, right out to the Delta. Dry, though, southern Alaska, a little more cloudy. That's bare chance of some scattered showers, though, south central Alaska. Next system bringing rain into the Alaska Peninsula. And the lows for tonight, 40s, pretty much sums it up across much of the state. Lower 50s in the Panhandle, upper 30s along the Arctic coast and in the Brooks Range. And the highs tomorrow, 60s, lower to mid, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, lower 40s on the Arctic coast, otherwise mid 50s, much of interior Alaska, upper 50s in the Aleutians, and upper 50s, lower 60s there for the southeast coastal areas. And then for the lows, Monday morning, mid to upper 30s there for the North Slope Arctic Coast area into the Brooks Range. Even Ambler forecast a shade below 40 degrees, 39. Otherwise in the 40s to near 50 over the remainder of interior Alaska. Same thing for the Aleutians. Copper River Basin, lows 40 to 45, 45 to 50 south central Alaska. Upper 40s to lower 50s for the southeast coast. And then the highs on Monday afternoon, pushing 70 over the eastern interior, North Waitok, 68, 69, 70, maybe even 71 in some locations. Mid to upper 60s Copper River Basin, and mid to upper 60s also Susitna Valley, Matanuska Valley, inland areas of Kenai Peninsula, lower 60s for Kodiak Island, and lower to mid 60s over the southern Panhandle, otherwise in the mid to upper 50s elsewhere.
We had a very active week here in southeast Alaska as an atmospheric river brought heavy rain and flooding to several rivers here in southeast Alaska. Grant Smith here, meteorologist with the National Weather Service here in Juneau, Alaska. I'm back in the office now, and I just want to give you a recap of what happened over the last few days, starting with the satellite image where you can really see the band of moisture as it moved from the Yakutat area, and then throughout the time it moved, throughout the day, it moved from the north to the south, and that brought a lot of rain to the area. Starting with the Seatuck River near Yakutat. Now, Yakutat got a little over 8 inches of rain over a 3-day period at the airport, and that caused the river to rise to about 72.4 feet. This is the third highest on record. Last time they saw numbers like this were in 2014. The Tire River near Skagway. Now, they had an interesting setup. They only got about a half an inch of rain at the airport over a 3-day period, but they did receive over 3 inches of rain at a higher elevation over a very short amount of time, and that allowed for the Tire River to peak at about 19.19 feet. This is the second highest on record. The last time they saw numbers like this were in 2013. Jumping over to the Juneau area where we saw a lot of impacts from the flooding. A lot of water over roadways. And this was a video sent in from our meteorologist in charge here in Juneau, catching a tree falling near the Mendenhall River. Also, some of the other impacts, roads were closed because of the flooding, and even some parking lots had some flooding and some water over the area. So the Jordan Creek had a peak at 10.24 feet. That is the third highest on record. The Mendenhall River also peaked at 11.55 feet. This was the third highest on record. And the Montana Creek peaked at 16 feet. This was the ninth highest on record. Now, as far as moisture amounts here in the Juneau area, we received about 2 to 5 inches of rain over a 2 to 3 day period, depending on where you measure, whether it be in the valley or downtown or on Douglas Island. But either way, about 2 to 5 inches of fell. But just like the Skagway area, the Juneau region also saw some ice melt and some snow melt and some heavier rain at the higher elevation. So all of that all added together ended up seeing a lot of flooding in the northern Panhandle. Now, as that band of moisture moved to the south, still saw some decent rainfall amounts in the central and southern Panhandle, but just didn't quite see the impacts that we saw in the northern Panhandle. Also, the Pelican, Elfin Cove area saw about 8 to 9 inches of rain, but as of Friday morning, we have not heard of any impacts from that amount of rain. So going ahead to the forecast as we go into Sunday and Monday, looks like we're seeing some drier conditions. So hopefully you're able to enjoy some of your weekend and heading into the next work week. For the National Weather Service in Juneau, Alaska, I'm meteorologist Grant.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, IFR central western Arctic coast down along the northwest coast. Seward Peninsula IFR, eastward the mid and lower Yukon River Valley out to the Yukon Delta, Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, all IFR, eastern Bering, south of St. Lawrence Island, across the Pribilost, IFR, and central western Aleutians IFR, except for, I believe, Attu Island becoming marginal. Fox Island's marginal VFR, same for the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR up to the western Alaska Range and into the almost to Fairbanks, Nenana, and up along the southern slopes of the eastern Brooks Range there. IFR, southern southeast coast, marginal to the north all the way to Yakutat and a little bit into the eastern Copper River Basin. And for the afternoon, VFR, Cook Inlet, Madawaska-Susitna Valley, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, as you can see, North Gulf Coast as well, and up across the eastern Alaska Range from the Copper River Basin to the Yukon River there. Pick up some marginal VFR now, increasing over the central interior and trying to push into the upper Tanana Valley, but pretty much marginal for the western half of the state, becoming IFR, or staying IFR for the lower Yukon River Valley, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, Togiak, Dillingham, King Salmon, IFR, Nunivak Island, Gamble, Savunga, St. George Island, as well as St. Paul, and most of the Aleutians. Kind of a mix there for the Fox Islands. And the Panhandle, VFR in the north with marginal VFR central and southern areas, and all along the coast from Yakutat down to Dixon Entrance. For the morning on Monday, areas of marginal VFR with areas of IFR, central western interior from Bristol Bay all the way up to the Arctic coast. Some VFR, Susitna Valley, South or Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin, and the Yukon Flats looking good. Kodiak Island VFR, IFR for the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea up to about St. Paul, St. George, and then the northern Bering Sea, another band there. Marginal VFR for the Panhandle, some IFR central and southern areas over toward the border. And for the afternoon, some VFR breaking now, especially southern Alaska and in the eastern interior, as well as southern Seward Peninsula, the Kobuk Valley, and central eastern North Slope, eastern Arctic coast, otherwise marginal VFR, mostly central interior. IFR, Bering Sea to the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, some IFR on the north coast of the Panhandle. Anaktuvuk, IFR becoming marginal tomorrow, so an improvement throughout the day. Lowest conditions early on, then better later in the day for both Anaktuvuk and Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, call it generally VFR day tomorrow, at least in part, with possible marginal VFR at any time there on the western entrance. Otherwise, not too bad. Same forecast for rainy. Possible marginal VFR western approach, otherwise looking good. And windy VFR to marginal VFR. Out the north side, though, VFR the entire day. And for Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, VFR, looking good for Tanita, VFR tomorrow, and Portage, VFR, even in the morning hours. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, about 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the southern part of the state, 4,000 to 6,000 feet northeast interior, 2,000 feet western Arctic coast, 6,000 feet with a cool upper level low swinging across the Panhandle. And icing, we've got with the moisture up there to the north, couple of zones of considerable moderate rime icing, one just south of the Bering Strait but north of St. Lawrence Island, another one there central interior south of the Yukon River, otherwise some mixed icing of the light variety, isolated moderate for the Panhandle, some icing threats also but nothing too significant for the Aleutians, and a little bit more for the Brooks Range area, otherwise really not too bad, nothing too serious icing wise. Jetstream at 33,000 feet showing west-northwest flow, 65 to 75 knots into the interior there, and then diving southeastward into the Gulf of Alaska. The stronger jet just south of the Alaska Peninsula and south of the Queen Charlottes. And for 9,000 feet, we've got west-northwesterlies, 30 to 45 knots in the interior and 40 to 45 off the Panhandle there. Southern Bering Sea, though pretty light wind-wise, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. And not too bad even the western Aleutians. And at 3,000 feet, westerlies 35 knots coming across the northern Bering Sea there, and about 30 knots as it makes landfall in the western interior. One narrow band there of southwesterlies, 25 to 30 knots and across central interior. Turbulence-wise, light to east moderate chop from the northeast interior down to the southwest.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Toman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecast, we got small craft advisories on the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow for west-northwest winds, 25 knots, seas just under 10 feet. North coast, winds will be out of the west at 20 knots, and looking northwest at 20 for Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas. And central northern inside waters, southerly winds, 10 to 15 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet. Moving on to the outlook for Monday, shaping up something like this, lighter winds all along the coastline. In fact, all areas there, all zones on the north coast, west-southwest at 10 knots, south coast, northwest at 15 knots, seas running 5 to 6 feet there. Inside waters, Clarence Strait, northwest at 10, Stevens Passage south at 10, and then southeast 15 for Lynn Canal, seas 2 to 3 feet. And moving westward, Prince William Sound tomorrow, west winds 15 knots, seas only at 2 feet though. And the eastern North Gulf Coast, west winds 20 knots, but 30 knots small craft advisory winds for the western North Gulf Coast for 30 knots there, and the Barren Islands as well with 7-foot seas, and Kamishak Bay west winds 25 knots, small craft advisories out for southern Cook Inlet southwest 25 with 8-foot seas, and north of Foreland southerlies at 20 knots. Moving on to Monday. South to southwest winds, 20 knots for Cook Inlet, 6-foot seas, southwest 20 for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands with 6-foot seas, and west 20 knots for the western North Gulf Coast over toward Middleton Island, looking at southerlies at 15 knots, seas 5 feet. Variable to east winds for Prince William Sound, only at 10 knots with pretty slight seas. Kodiak Island, small craft advisories again tomorrow for west winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. West winds at 20 for Bristol Bay and Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest at 20, Pacific side, west 15. And from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, winds will be out of the west at 20 knots. Outlook for Monday, small craft advisories, next system affecting the Alaska Peninsula, 30 knots southeast winds from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev. And on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, winds will be east at 25 knots, south 15 for Bristol Bay. And from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, small craft advisory, south wind, southwesterlies at 25 knots, 15 to 20 knot winds for Kodiak Island, out of the southwest with seas 5 to 6 feet for your Monday. And then for Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, south to southeast 15 knots, Unimak Island, not much different, southeast at about 20, 5 to 7 foot seas, Atka, Adak, east-southeast to 20 knots, and east to 20 for Amchitka. Small craft advisories for the area from Kiska to Shemya for northeast winds at 25 knots. Monday, Shemya to Kiska, northwest at 20. Amchitka, small craft advisories, north 25 knots. Adak and Atka, small craft advisories, north to northeast 25 to 30 knots. Stronger winds for the Fox Islands, east-southeast 30 knots, seas 7 to 10 feet. Southwest coast, an easy one, southwest 25 knots, seas 7 feet. Same thing for the Pribilof, southwest winds 25 knots. Small craft advisories also out for St. Matthew Island, northern Bering Sea, for southwest winds at 25 knots, seas just under 10 feet. Southwest 20 knots, St. Lawrence Island, and west at 20 for Norton Sound. For Monday, north 20 for Norton Sound, same forecast or same speed and direction for St. Lawrence Island. And small craft advisories, Yukon Delta coast westerlies at 25 knots, southwest 20 for the area south of Nunivak Island. Pribilofs, light easterlies at 15 knots, northeast at 20 for St. Matthew Island. Up along the Arctic coast, most of the stretch of the coastline there, looking at westerly winds at 20 knots tomorrow. Extreme east side there, Kaktovik to Demarcation Point, Barter Island area south at 15, and northwest 20 from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, and back to the west to 20 knots down to Wales. And for Monday, Wales right up to Cape Beaufort, northwest 20 knots, west 20 for the central and western Arctic coast, and then south to southwest at 15 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. For tonight, front pushing rain, band of light rain eastward there along the Arctic coast north slope, even the central Brooks Range, extending southward into the Kuskokwim Valley, but becoming pretty light and scattered as far as precipitation goes there in the trailing edge coming across northern Bristol Bay. Otherwise, dry for south central Alaska, clear and drier for the eastern interior, Copper River Basin. Periods of rain with that system moving through the panhandle tonight with a front, and just a chance of rain over the Aleutians on the northern side of that system just to your south. Then for the day tomorrow, chance of rain continues there, not a real big precipitation producer with that front in the Aleutians. Drier and some sunshine over southern Alaska, but mostly cloudy and wet in the northern interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.